وشد الحيل كل اللي تتمنيه عندي، لا القهر يطويني ولا الليل امان امان برم افندي. يا مصر قومي وشد الحيل كل اللي تتمنيه عندي، لا القهر يطويني ولا الليل امان امان برم افندي. رافعين جباه حرة شريفة، باسطين ايادي تأدي الفرض. رافعين جباه حرة شريفة، باسطين ايادي تأدي الفرض. ناقصين مؤذن وخليفة، ونور ما بين السما والأرض. رافعين جباه حرة شريفة، باسطين ايادي تأدي الفرض. ناقصين مؤذن وخليفة، ونور ما بين السما والأرض. يا مصر عودي زي زمان، ندها من الجامعة وحلوة. يا مصر يا مصر عودي زي زمان، ندها من الجامعة وحلوة. يا مصر عودي زي زمان، يا مصر عودي زي زمان، ندها من الجامعة وحلوة. يا مصر عودي زي زمان، ندها من الجامعة وحلوة. يا مصر عودي زي زمان، ندها من الجامعة وحلوة. يا مصر عودي زي زمان، تعصي العدو وتعندي امان امان برم افندي. يا مصر
يا مصر قومي وشد
الحيل كل اللي تتمنيه عندي، لا القهر يطويني ولا الليل امان امان برم افندي. الدم يجري في ماء النيل، والنيل بيفتح على سجني. الدم يجري في ماء النيل، والنيل بيفتح على سجني. والسجن يطرح غلة وتيل، نجوع ونتعرى ونبني. الدم يجري في ماء النيل، والنيل بيفتح على سجني. والسجن يطرح غلة وتيل، نجوع ونتعرى ونبني.
Hi. Don't worry, I'm not going to keep us here for much longer. I know we're all eager to sort of leave this room and go out into the night. But I just feel like I want to say something about the significance of having a conference like this in Cairo now, a conference about language and translation and dissidence. Because of the crackdown, many groups and collectives that had formed, whether formally or spontaneously or in reaction to something or in a state of emergency, found themselves at different points having to disband, whether suddenly or sort of slowly, having to withdraw and stop their activities. And more than that, there's been a diminishing of the kind of spaces where people could come together and discuss the events that had happened, the events that were happening around us. And all of this has led to a state of sort of atomization, I think, and Sameh at the opening of this conference had talked about the collective trauma. of the Egyptian revolution and its aftermath or continuation, however you want to speak of it. And a part of that collective trauma is actually that maybe doesn't get much discussion is how it's experienced in isolation a lot of the time because of this lack of space. And the conference in the last few days before I talk about what the conference has made me think of directly, I think it's important to also acknowledge, and this ties into what Shireen Sekhali was talking about in referencing the limitations of this, the idea of nahda and awakening in looking at events in the region and how it sort of tends to imply that the rest of the time we're asleep, which is far from the case, because even if there's been an atomization and a wiping out of collective action in some ways, that is not an absolute, and people, whether as individuals or as ongoing groups, have continued to sort of translate their experiences of the last few years into new projects, be they art, literature, film, the incredible projects that human rights workers and organizations continue to put forward in Egypt under these very strangled circumstances. So it's important to remember that we are by no means asleep. And also the conference has made me think a lot about the way that we as people who have experienced, who reflect on or think about or write about the events of the last few years and ongoing events, how we talk to each other. So not how we talk to the world at large or the public or what we write on our blogs or in articles, but how we actually communicate with one another. And I found myself surprised when I was on the journalism panel on the first day, and I was surprised by the difficulty that I had in using the word coup to refer to what had happened in 2013, to actually say it out loud in a microphone at a conference in Egypt. And I thought about how different that would have been somewhere else. And it really surprised me because, a lot of times we maybe focus on dealing with fear and constraint when it comes to straightforward political activity or political expression. But there's an equally important and equally dangerous constraint that we suffer in our internal communications and our communications amongst one another. So in that light, it's been very refreshing and very enlivening and extremely thought-provoking to work on this conference and be a part of it and see it actually come to life. And so on that note, I'll go on to my several thanks that I want to make. First of all, thanks to you guys for coming and for putting in your thought and your effort and your writing and your speaking abilities to making this such a rich 3 days. And thank you to the staff here at Robit who've been incredible at facilitating all of this logistically. And please give a round of applause to Dina Kafefi, who's sort of silently sitting in the back there. Dina has been almost single-handedly in charge of all of the logistics to do with this conference and has done an incredible job despite falling, unfortunately, quite ill at the inauguration of this. So thank you. And finally, of course, to the interpreters for doing an amazing job, and one crucial to the spirit of the conference. And yeah, thank you. And finally, and by way of bringing you up here, thank you to Muna for the concept, for bringing me on board, for being
Just a very, very brief word. Yasmin has done all the thanks, so I don't need to repeat them. But the remit of this conference and of the whole research project that I'm working on, the official remit, has been to draw attention to the political import of translation, narrowly conceived, and the way in which all the protest movements, including the revolution in Egypt, are heavily mediated by various types of translational acts. Although at one level, the point was to draw attention to this, and I'm glad that I think people are beginning to engage with it. At another level, as we were getting close to the conference and the political landscape in Egypt was changing quite radically, I was very grateful for the fact that most people think of translation in that stupid, limited way. And that the authorities probably thought, a conference on translation really can't possibly do much harm. And that kind of was our saving grace, as it were, because I heard from various people that I know that the last 2 or 3 days before the conference started, so the largest number of registrations, and I was thinking, are people mad? They're leaving it to the very last minute to register. And I heard from various people that they didn't really think it was going to happen. It can't happen at this moment in time in Egypt. It happened partly because of that stupid idea of translation being a silly little technical thing that can't possibly do much harm, but very largely because of the efforts of Dina and Townhouse, for which I'm very grateful, the amount of negotiation of the political situation that went on in the background, and I can't pretend to get my head around the various things that were done and why they were done and how that negotiation proceeded, including I mentioned that already, but a lot of people weren't there, the very obvious mistranslation of the title of the conference for very real pragmatic reasons. All that was really with the advice and huge interventions on the part of Townhouse and Dina, so it only happened because of that, and I'm very grateful. Just to remind you, because some of you weren't there at the beginning, that the videos that have been taken of all the plenaries and the workshop will be available on the website. You all know the conference website, as soon as we can make it, but hopefully not later than a couple of weeks or so. Also, a copy of the program, if you didn't manage to get a copy because the numbers exceeded our expectations and we didn't obviously print enough programs, a copy of the program will be downloadable from the website. So thank you, and I hope that we will have other ways. I know that this has been an important event for connecting. We can't keep repeating the same types of platforms. We have to think of new types of platforms in future. And so I hope that, not necessarily another conference in Egypt, in Townhouse, but I hope we can think of other ways in which we can keep that conversation going, whether in Egypt or elsewhere, preferably in Egypt, because not everybody can travel to Berlin or London or whatever, so we have to think of new ways of doing it. And thank you.
وغسلت في بدني وطولي وكتبت اسمه على جلدي أمان بيرم فندي يا مصر